Reference data is a critically important aspect of the business. It sets up how different securities are created, how they pay interest, when they mature, all the issues around coupons and things like that. In fact, I wrote a piece just this week around some of the challenges with setting up corporate bonds and in comparing a couple of different providers. We found that roughly 20% of the bonds just issued in April had some challenges between two providers. With me to discuss reference data, getting this whole thing cleaned up and straight and in a position where people can trade off the information is Peter Moss. Peter Moss is the CEO of the SmartStream Data Utility, or the RDU as people like to call it. Peter, welcome to Tabb Forum.
Thank you, Larry. I'm glad to be here.
So the reference data issue is actually a pretty major deal. You've got different sources of information, you've got different products, you've got different geographies. This whole thing is not a slam dunk, and kind of the RDU is kind of part and parcel to try to help us get this information clean.
So that's right. I mean, the security reference data that the industry uses has always been notoriously sort of suspect in terms of quality, coverage, and what's happened over the last 10, 20 years is that as firms have automated their businesses, they've found that the sensitivity to poor quality data suddenly becomes that much greater. So a lot of firms have put in teams to actually cleanse data, to scrub data, to sort of fill gaps and so on. And what we're doing is trying to do that whole process once, do it well, inherit best practice from across the market, and then actually deliver to the industry a high quality security master that they can use.
Now the RDU, the Reference Data Utility, was kind of developed, 3-4 years ago, and if I remember correctly, it was like Goldman and Morgan Stanley and maybe JP, I think, brought together. Is it still just those three guys, or is it bigger, or how does this process kind of work?
No, it's all of those three, but it's also now a total of 25 contracted customers. We're delivering data to those customers on a daily basis, and so it's starting to get a little bit bigger. We're
getting a little critical mass.
Exactly, and the critical mass comes with benefits generally, because it means you actually can get you can inherit the quality approaches of different firms and bring all of those together into sort of one approach, which actually is working very well.
Now, is the process that you kind of these 20, 30 different entities funnel you data, or do you grab the data and then push it back, or a combination of them feeding you, you feed them, you clean it all up and then refeed it? How does this work?
So that's a great question. So we essentially step in to manage the data for a firm. So typically we're sourcing the data from the same places that they have done previously, using the commercial agreements that they've got in place. So
if I don't have a relationship, let's just say with Refinitiv or Bloomberg, I'm just not going to get it from dealing with the RDU.
You have to have that relationship, that commercial entitlement to the data.
Okay.
And then what we do is we actually run a sort of a service where we bring that together, the data from the various different sources that you choose, and we deliver that as a high quality security master to you on a follow the sun basis. So typically several hours before the start of a market open, so you can actually populate your systems. You can actually trade from the start of the trading day and then clear and settle and everything associated with that as well.
Interesting. So and I assume this then leverages all the content and services from the collective utility that I have licensed ability to get, so that I don't need teams of people scrubbing this and checking it, and I don't have people yelling at me, Larry, why did you screw this up?
Exactly. So what we do is we bring the data into the utility from all of the different sources, usually once. That's not true in every case, but usually once. We bring that together, we standardize it, we create what we consider to be the perfect security master, the single view of the market. We've got a cross-reference across that, so we have all of the various symbols that are typically used in the market, cross-reference with each other, so you have an unambiguous mechanism to identify a product that you're trading. And then that single view of the world is then typically customized for an individual customer, because every customer, if you think about it, will have somewhat different entitlements to data. Every customer typically has adopted different standards in some respect to the market.
So I might want this vendor's data here and that vendor's data here, and it might not necessarily be the same.
Exactly. You might have adopted some standard for a particular attribute that is slightly out of line with our view of what should be used, so we can translate to the language that you're using within your firm. And what the benefit of that is that you can actually, as you ingest the data, you don't break downstream applications, so you can continue to operate in an effective fashion, just knowing that the data quality has improved dramatically and we've taken complexity out of your business.
So not the dollar and cents economics, but the economics of this, I assume, is that we bring you in and it's a fraction of what it would cost me to hire 1,000 folks in Southeast Asia to kind of fix this up.
Yes, but actually the interesting thing we find is that as we deliver the data into a firm, you certainly need to do less work in order to actually sort of make it appropriate for your automated sort of processes. But the biggest benefit tends to be on the sort of the reduction of exceptions because of poor quality.
So on the risk management side, yeah, and operations,
exactly. So we have a customer, for example, that actually has seen literally an 80% reduction in breaks, data-related exceptions. That translated for them to something in the region of 21,000 sort of exceptions that they no longer have to manually deal with.
That's a big deal.
And do a little bit of maths, that's at least a couple of $1 million worth of benefit, and that was just in Europe alone. So they're rolling that out now more broadly across the world, and they'll see similar benefits in other regions. So
if we look in the world, certainly Europe is becoming a different environment because of MiFID and some of the issues around that. How have you seen that kind of translate into demands around the RDU? And
so I mean, perhaps not surprisingly, and particularly for MiFID. MiFID is a very sort of security-oriented regulation. So
there's a lot of reporting requirements.
Exactly, and right down at the instrument level, you need to have quite a lot of data to support the trade reporting, the transaction reporting, pre-trade price transparency if you're a systematic internalizer, all of those things. So it was a very natural extension for us to build out a MiFID data set to go alongside the security data that we have brought in from elsewhere.
So you're not just dealing with the 800-pound big bank gorillas. You're dealing with some of the more nimble electronic guys as well.
Absolutely, and today we are actually also filling gaps in that MiFID data. So one of the issues that the community found when they went to implement the MiFID II trade reporting regulations was that you needed to know who actually was a systematic internalizer when you were trading with someone. And you need to know that right down at a very detailed level, at the instrument level. And so that data didn't exist. ESMA, the regulator in this instance, had not covered the collection and the publication of that data set. So we got together with the APA community, the trade reporting entities, and we've been working with them to sort of essentially create that data set. So we collect data from 110 brokers today. Number keeps growing, but 110 today. On a daily basis, we sort of consolidate that, publish that back up to the market, and that means that all of the APAs and all of those
know who the counterparties are.
Can trade report effectively, and without that, it's actually very difficult to trade report accurately.
That's
and
interesting.
in line with the regulation.
So if I think about it, so you can kind of use this kind of tactically, but also strategically. So I would imagine some of these big relationships. So if I'm a BAML or Morgan Stanley, well, they did it, or whoever, deciding to like rip out my whole reference data infrastructure, that's not a decision I would take lightly. but you can kind of use that the RDU kind of tactically in certain situations as well.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, what we're finding is that it takes quite a long time to convince someone to switch out the way they're actually sort of managing their reference data today in a wholesale fashion, and the bigger the bank, the longer it takes typically. So we have found other ways of being relevant, and the goal fundamentally is to prove that we are credible, that we can deliver what we say we're doing, that you can trust us to actually look after your data, and so I think every opportunity to deliver some aspect of a service to someone just enhances the reputation and actually gives us the opportunity to build the business, build customer relationships, and start to actually sort of build out the core security master customer set as well.
Interesting. I think it's a good place to call it a day. Peter, thanks for joining us. Peter Moss, the CEO of the SmartStream Reference Data Utility. I'm Larry Tabb, founder and research chairman of Tabb Group, and thanks for watching. And I guess as a last take, reference data, as I said, is the lifeblood of this industry, and we got to figure out better ways of making this more straight through and more seamless. And Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Larry.